Careful what you say or you'll get better.
Yay!
All right. Hey guys, how you doing?
What's up?
Good.
All right. Ready for another exciting episode of Three Tortured Souls.
Shadow people.
Shadow people. I think Kenny called me racist when I proposed that topic.
Oh, no,
Like, dude, shadow lives matter. We got to talk about it. We got to talk about it.
Oh, you're gonna get me in so much trouble.
Yes, I am. So welcome Tiffany, John, JD, and Bob. How you all doing? Glad you could tune in tonight. So as was already said, the topic tonight is shadow people. So we're going to talk a little bit about their characteristics, move into a little bit about the history, and then some what people think they are. There's a variety of different thoughts as far as what shadow people might be. Everything from aliens that are inter and extra dimensional beings to ghosts and demons. It's a wide gamut of thoughts on what these things might be, and then we'll talk about some potential natural explanations for them as well. So anyway, that's kind of a quick opening, and I'll turn it over to, let's see, Kenny, since he said he did the least amount of prep work to get his opening thoughts.
So yeah, by least amount, I mean none. None. I mean, shit. Last night, I didn't even know it was your turn, Dave. I
Obviously
totally screwed that one up.
I noticed that.
First and foremost, I want to say thanks to Dr. Jim, if he's out there watching this, for the glasses. He gave me these a while ago, and I finally they're smaller than my usual amount of alcohol that I ingest, so I don't use them often. Plus, after I get drunk, I don't like handling glass. So, but on that note, shadow people, I mean, when my first thoughts usually come to ghost hunting, because I hear it there most. But I know that it's been around for a while, and you can go back through different religions, and depending on like what their version of the underworld or hell or something like that, you have things like shades that are shadowy figures. They're just dark, and we see them in a lot of sci-fi, science fiction movies and stuff like that. The movie Ghost, I mean, that was one of the scary things, you know, that when you were going to hell, the shadows came to life and sucked your ass down, and made that weird, like, kind of like dying cat kind of noise, that really kind of freaked you out. But when it came to ghost hunting, it really wasn't until that movie came out that I really started hearing that people using it. And even after that, it almost, to me, it feels like an evolution of paranormal sightings. You know, you had like the apparition, and then that wasn't good enough anymore because people started getting them. And then you had shadow people, because that was like, oh, well, that's kind of darker, literally. But it was like, this is something different. You can't see what it is. It could be evil, or couldn't. I don't know what it could be. But, and then you went on to demons, because everyone has a demon now. I think I have one on the other side of the desk here. But I mean, it's just part of the evolution of ghosts and how they're presented to people, and something that's easy to claim to have experienced. Mm-hmm. And we can get into that later when we talk about possible causes and stuff like that. But that's my opening statement. I really don't. I don't give it much. I mean, it's cool in history and literature, but when it comes to ghost hunting, it's well, I'll get into my opinions later when we start talking about causes. So I'll throw it up to Tim.
Well, I want to start out with I found a good photo to use. I went to the website to get this, and I attempted to purchase it, and it just downloaded. So I don't know if I'm supposed to pay for it or what, but I did. I tried. I tried to put it in the cart, but the artist's name I put at the bottom, at least minimally, so I could give that person credit. So that's why that name's down there. And as soon as I saw it, I thought I'm going to have to try to pronounce that before I get too drunk. So I'm going to try to say the artist is Theodoros Mavrogatos.
Started out strong with the pronunciation.
There you go.
I'm sorry, but yeah. So yeah, I do like that a lot.
Very cool.
I came across, looking at it, I came across a really good idea that was a common thread that I found interesting. I want to also start out and just say, before we get into a lot of stuff, is just do a really good disclaimer that if you are really literally seeing shadows and different things out of the corner of your eyes, don't contact a paranormal investigator. Go ahead and make a eye appointment before you do anything else. And looking through a lot of things, I found that seeing shadow figures, or at least shadows and different objects in the peripheral of your vision, is a sign that you could have some type of eye disease or eye problem. So I would just want to go ahead and say off the top of the bat, if you're having any type of eye issue, contact a specialist before you contact WeBustGhosts.com or someplace like that.
That's always good advice. Make sure you're physically and mentally sound before you contact a ghost hunting group.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to talk about a little bit of the characteristics that people report with these things, and then turn it over to you both to comment on that and a little bit of discussion, and then we'll slide into the history and what people think they are, followed by some natural explanations, or even a little bit of a discussion on why some of the natural explanations don't explain everything that people have reported. I mean, if you can piece them all together, this natural explanation explains that, this one explains something else, but we'll kind of dive into that and what people have reported. And one of the interesting things that I found is that it seems like the reports are starting to change a little bit. People in the past reported that they would only see them out of the peripheral vision. But now they seem to be seeing them a lot more straight on and for a longer period of time, which is a little bit interesting. So characteristics. So obviously by the name shadow people, they're shadows. They started out being noticed in the peripheral visions. However, as I just said, there seem to be more reports of people seeing them straight on for longer periods of time, not just the fleeting images in the dark in the peripheral image. Some people report that they jump on their chest and tend to choke them. They can happen when you're starting to just wake up or just go to sleep. So obviously that leads me to think about sleep paralysis, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And when people see these things or have the experience with them, they feel uncomfortable, scared, uneasy, and sometimes they're paralyzed with fear. And I think the paralyzed with fear, from some of the reading that I did, seems to be more associated with what we would typically relate to sleep paralysis, where you're kind of paralyzed, you can't move, you can't do anything. Let's see what else. People feel like they're under psychic attack. The interesting thing that I found is that not interesting, it's not surprising actually, that paranormal people in this area that talk about these things don't agree on what the intentions or the general feeling are of shadow people. They say they could be anything from evil, neutral, helpful to menacing. So later on, I found some stuff where they talk about the consistency in reports, but then again, I'm not sure that's exactly true, because the consistency is not in they feel evil, they're neutral, helpful, or menacing. What is it? Why are they all different? Why are people interpreting these things differently? Sometimes they see red eyes with shadow people. They're seeing them for longer periods of time now. We'll talk a little bit about the Hat Man, which that I'm not sure that's typically Tim's got a Hat Man with the eyes. So very characteristic of what people report is what Tim shows in the picture to the side of his head there. So three-piece suit, the Hat Man with a pocket watch. Then it leads a little bit into Slender Man, which we're not going to get too much into, but they've tried to make a little bit of a link. Maybe there's something going on there with the Shadow People and the Slender Man, but definitely the Hat Man is a category or a subcategory of this that we can spend a little bit of time talking about. They've been seen alone or with groups of people. And when there's a group of shadow people. And when there's a group of shadow people, it seems like one of the shadows, there's a lead, there's a leader, there's somebody in charge, and they're directing the other shadow people on what to do. People claim that there's been some actual physical injuries to them, and with scratches or bruises. Object movement. Sometimes there's object movement attributed to them being in a situation with one of the shadow people. They feel like they're after their soul or trying to steal their life force. And one way to make them go away is just invoke the name of Jesus, and they tend to disappear. Reports go back decades. They go back at least, we'll talk about the history, but going back to 2001, and then a little bit before that, there's been reports of them. However, the global descriptions, if you look at different cultures, across cultures, the descriptions tend to stay pretty similar. But is that something to think about as we get into this? Is that because there's so many stories on the internet and on TV shows that people are hearing that they're reporting similar things, or is there truly some sort of phenomena where they're all reporting the same thing? So that's a little bit of the characteristics of them. I'm going to open it up. Tim, did you find anything else? You want to make any comments on some of the characteristics that are reported with them?
No, that's pretty much what I got. Looking up different ideas of why they're here or what they are. I get same thing: aliens, ghosts, demons, time travelers, the remnants or the remaining energy of time travelers. Take a drink.
That's a random mid-thought drink.
Dramatic pause.
Energy and dimensional beings.
Oh, come on now.
Breaking the oil.
What you mentioned though is something that I found really interesting, and I kept coming across, was that just many cultures, religions, over a large kind of span of times, have similar physical recollection or reports of shadow people. Mm-hmm. That kind of just makes it makes me think that since it's culturally it's pretty consistent, it makes me think that it sounds like it's biological in origin, only because like the cause of it would be like why you would see it would be biological, instead of not necessarily, although it probably does have an effect after stories get popularized and other people start hearing it, and then their recounts might be similar or change as they tell the story. But it seems to have a nice consistency, or at least a level of consistency in the physical reporting of what people see, which just makes me think it's like a biological issue with either the eye or part of the brain or part of the functioning of the brain. The hat that you see there, mm-hmm. I don't know if you came into it, but the stories of the Hat Man is what's believed to have spurred Slender Man. Because along with the hat came people saying that the shadow person was also dressed in a suit that resembled an undertaker's or a funeral home's worker. And the reports began to grow until it was like 8 or 10 feet tall. Um, and that I have other stuff, but I think I want to kind of stop there. But I'm glad that you brought up the consistency over time, I guess, over time, and how many different cultures, especially even religions, different religions, if people have religious beliefs, it really didn't change what they saw. And I think the consistency in what people see over cultures, religion, and time, it just makes me think that people are kind of seeing at least something that is similar, which makes me think that it's probably a function biologically, and that they can report it. I have a lot of other stuff with sleep deprivation. You kind of hit on that too. And there's a really good study. I don't know if you came across it. Severe sleep deprivation causes hallucinations and a gradual progression towards psychosis with increasing time awake. Whew, okay. So I have that to talk about for just a little bit too. And also stress and anxiety, which I think could tie in pretty well with ghost hunters. But yeah, I'll leave that for a little bit later.
Okay. Kenny, any comments on characteristics or thoughts?
I mean, I guess it depends on who you talk to, because when it comes to when we look back at different religions, and again touching on like the underworld, and because you have these dark, shadowy things that usually are representative of something evil or not so nice coming to get you. So there's different shapes, all different shapes and sizes. They're not always human like. But when it comes to ghost hunting, I've heard people usually describe them as human-like. It's a human figure, almost like a silhouette, depending on the different parts that you see. Somebody might see just an arm waving, or just like the torso and the head, like a bust kind of thing. But it's always human shaped and not anything else. Once in a while, I have gotten the report that they've seen something like a blob floating around, and just irregular shape that changes constantly. And I mean, some of these things you can attribute to some of the stuff that you guys have talked about. We can also talk about like anxiety, high stress situations. You get the blood pumps on the back of the eyeball, and can cause pressure, which can screw up your vision. You can have, you talked about sleep paralysis. There's also the subtle movement, the shifting of your eyes that happens. And there is a severe condition, and I'm gonna try and do a Tim here.
Do it.
Nystagmus, I think it is. And it's when you can have eye movements from side to side, or up and down, or even in a circular position, and that distorts your vision. But I know we do that at night, especially at dark, when we're in the dark and we're trying to see. When you're trying to look down that very dark hallway, you're not seeing everything as it is. You're seeing there's different things going on. One, your eyes are shifting because you're not focused on one pinpoint area, so you're getting a slight movement, a slight motion going on. But you also have your cone and rod cells that are your receptors that are getting the light coming in. If you're looking at a scene and the scene doesn't change, they get bored, and they start they're not changing, they're not taking in any more input or any more stimuli, so they stop not working altogether, but they slow down a little bit, let's say, take a rest, and that can cause the perception of movement down like an end of a dark hallway or down some stairs, and it may look like there's a shadow figure, but it's actually just it's your vision distorting, and it looks like different degrees of blackness, I guess. That's what it is.
To kind of couple on that, I don't, not to interrupt you, but I'll forget if I don't do it now.
No, please do. It makes me look like I talk longer.
So there's a lot of really good. I didn't look it back up for this, but I have checked out like the visual misinterpretations of when you have grays and blacks mixed together, how it can mimic different type of movement in shadows. And it's a really good, cool optical illusion. And a lot of times when you see people ghost hunting, you see them in minimal light, maybe with some ambient light coming in from somewhere. And there's a lot of darks and grays mixed. And just like you were saying, a lot of times your eyes get tired. If you try to focus too hard in one spot, you get what you were talking about. And I'm not even going to try to do that name again, but your eyes kind of wobble a little bit, and it causes a visual illusion, not necessarily a hallucination, but just an illusion that you see movement, and you can misinterpret that as seeing something.
You have to remember that when our vision, even though we see a lot, we're not focused on everything that's in front of us. Our focal point is about the size of a quarter. When you're talking about vision, when you're looking out, like I'm looking at the camera, and about the quarter of the lens, that's what I'm actually focused on. Everything outside of that quarter, that American quarter, is just peripheral vision. And you have different cells, cone cells and rod cells. You have your cones for color, which are in the center and are good for high detail and color, but your rod cells are on the outside, and they're good for black and white. They don't see color, but they're also good for picking up movement, which is goes back to the whole where it started, where shadow people were seen out of the corner of your eye because you picked up any kind of movement quicker on the side. So I mean, there's that. I mean, a good example too is when you watch TV, watch a movie that's not like ultra 8K high definition. Watch maybe like 2K or 4K when there's a night scene and it's very dark, and you'll see as the camera pans across like a night sky or a dark room, you'll see the different shades of blackness or black and grays that kind of distort and they move around. Even if the camera's not moving, they kind of go in and out different areas, and that's kind of what we're seeing. It's the end result.
Yeah. Okay, so JD has a question. If they're shadowy, how can anyone see that level of detail? I'll start first. I think the term was coined by Heidi Hollis, and I think by shadow people, she means they're like Tim's picture. They're dark. They look like shadows. And quite honestly, depending on the angle of the sun or whatever light you're using, if you see your shadow, you can sometimes see pretty decent detail. You can see that, you might have a shirt that's not tucked in. You might have a hat on. You might have glasses. So I think that you can see a certain level of detail. And by shadows, I'm not sure, at least originally, maybe, it was kind of that fleeting movement in the side of your eye. But as we get into the history of it and what the term coined by Heidi Hollis and what was described on Coast to Coast AM, where the whole thing kind of, from what I understand, got started, there's two things. They are seeing detail. It's not just typically a blob. There's actually a humanoid type figure there, but they also are reporting that they're not seeing it just in the peripheral vision as much anymore. It's actually, they're seeing these things straight on. So that I get what everybody's saying with the peripheral vision. I agree with that 100%, but people are now reporting it as seeing it straight on as opposed to just out of the corner of your eye, which may or may not be due to the fact that there's so many stories out there, or you go to a certain location, like let's say Waverly Hills Sanatorium, where shadow figures are a huge thing. People report a lot of shadow figures, but that isn't a location that people know that they've reported these things, and you're expecting things. You're walking around in low light conditions. So again, there's a whole lot of potential natural explanations that could play into that. But just because they're saying they're shadowy, I don't think they mean that they're fuzzy, that they're not distinct. I think a lot of times the shadow figure terminology from what Heidi Hollis developed is that they're dark. They look like your shadow. And sometimes, with your shadow, you can see pretty good detail. So just my comments on that.
Dave, that's when I was talking about the lights in the darks, the grays and the darks. It's exactly what made me look at it. Was we went to Waverly Hills years ago. We did like a nice tour, took a van, lots of people rented it for the night. And the long hallways, when we were there, it was very hollowed out. They were still cleaning it. So there were no windows. It was very nice, clear sky, full moon. So as the moon was moving, or as we were moving, either way, the shadows would come, the light would come in through the windows, and you had a really nice mix of grays and very darks, and they were checkered. So it would come in the window and out the door of what used to be, I'm sure, a patient's room, and then out into the hall, so that you'd have some illumination, then complete darkness, then illumination, then complete darkness. Well, the number of people that talked about seeing shadow people just that night, like I can remember like running around with somebody going, it's over there. And so I would go over there and see if it's over there. And then somebody else would say, I saw it move over there. So we would like just move around. There was so many sightings of shadow people that night. It made me go like, why are we seeing that? So that's when I started looking up what can cause visual, I will keep wanting to say hallucinations.
Optical illusions.
Optical illusions. Thank you. Yeah, I've got too many hallucinations over here on my notes.
Yeah, that's what you got. Too much.
Yeah, and too much alcohol in me. And
there you go.
That's it. So I looked up like the environment that we were in and looked at the colors and found like just that grayscale and dark scale together creates a perfect environment for not understanding, or at least seeing a lot of movement from peripheral vision. And it happened a lot. I didn't want to, but when I was talking about that with Kenny, that was my memory of being at Waverly Hills. That's what kind of sparked it.
The two things I want to touch on. Waverly Hills, the last time I was there, we took a tour, and it was absolutely forbidden to turn on flashlights. Like, you went through the entire tour in the complete darkness, except for like 10 minutes where they took you up top and the guide turned on a light, and you could walk around. But the rest of it, you're in complete darkness. So you're in that environment that's ripe for what we're talking about here. Long hallways, nothing but grays and blacks all around you. There's nothing that helps your vision out. And so, yeah, I can totally see getting known for shadow figures, because not only because of the reputation, but because it's the environment is optimized for that kind of optical illusion. It's made for that.
Well, there's even more to that I found with looking up some reasons that people would see that, but was the biological effects of being in a fear state or a high anxiety state causes eye dilation. Adrenaline causes pressure in the back of your eye. That can give some blurry vision. And then you also have the priming. So before we started our tour, or before we were just kind of turned loose for the whole night, we did a tour, something like what you did. And the tour guide, took us through each room, or took us down each hall, told us stories about people getting chased out and, having cell phone calls that they were locked in by beasts and demons, and, just really doing a good job of telling the story and getting people like really ramped up. And I think it was maybe the third floor was where something was supposed to be evil, and they have a lot of people that report being attacked. So yeah, I mean, you coupled with that, you also get a lot of priming to get your anxiety at an escalated level, which biologically I think gets you into like a fight, flight, or a freeze state, which has all kinds of effects on your body.
Right.
Yep.
And then the other thing I want to touch on was what Dave, you mentioned about going from peripheral vision to people seeing them straight on. And I wonder if that might fall into, at least partly, into the evolution of this idea of this being something paranormal. Things in the peripheral vision, which when you look, yeah, it's gone, but now you're dealing with a different receptor. So there's issues with that. But then the more people that say it, and that's been a staple in ghost stories for as long as I can remember, but maybe it's just, well, partly again, something that evolved where it was like, okay, well, you guys are seeing them, and I'm getting my hat Maz on here. You guys are seeing them out of the corner of your eye. I see them straight on. I look straight and I can see them when they're right in front of me. And given the visual issues that we're talking about here, I can see how that would evolve. At least partly. I'm not saying that's for all of them, but partly how it would come into the.
It could be. I mean, what could have started out as a physiological thing, because more and more reports are there, and you build expectation and you prime people, they could be seeing them more straight on. And it doesn't help that people are wandering around in the freaking dark.
Yeah.
And your eyesight, let's face it, people, your eyesight is not that good in the dark. I mean, I can sit in my house at night and turn the lights out, and I'm going to think I see things moving, because that's just the nature of human vision. We're not very good at night, and especially if you turn the lights out and you're in an unfamiliar location where you don't know where things are. I mean, in my house, I can walk down the hallway and, maybe there's I don't know, a certain piece of furniture or something that to some people who didn't know that there was furniture there, it looks like a figure standing there. It looks like a shoulder and a head, but that's not it. It's a chair. It's just a chair with a headrest. So I think that plays into part of it. Is something that turned out purely physiological could still be physiological, but you're going to see it straight on because of the priming, the expectation that might be set up in some locations.
Right. And I like how you addressed like unfamiliar territory. You're in the dark. Everything looks, especially because you're already primed. If you're there for a ghost hunt and you're part of a team and you're there, it's unfamiliar, you're going to see shit and it's going to freak you out.
That's a good point he brought up. Dave's probably going to, I should have researched this before I said it, because when I typed it down, I was like, if I get this wrong, Dave's going to let me know. But when you're in an unfamiliar place like that and you're primed, excuse me, your anxiety's high, your adrenaline's up, and your pupils are dilated. Your brain makes you, or would rather have you make more type 2 errors, where you perceive something as being a threat. Because
it happens even in a place that's familiar. Like in Halloween, we have this tall butler guy. It's like a 6 foot tall butler animated, I don't know, doll, whatever you want to call it. But, you put it up, it's not always there. I come downstairs in the morning, get up early. It's still dark this time of year. I come downstairs, I see that thing standing there, it scares the living crap out of me. It looks like a big dark shadow sitting there. And I'm like, fuck, if I had a gun, that thing would have holes in it. But it scares the hell out of you, even in a familiar place. If something changes a little bit, or you're half asleep, or you're, whatever is a little bit different, you're on alert. And those type of things pop up and you're like, damn, that's a human figure there.
And add into how many of these ghost hunts and paranormal investigation things and tours are late at night.
Yep.
And
good point.
You guys touched on sleep deprivation. I mean, if you're going to like 2 a.m. at an event, and I mean, I can tell you a personal experience, personal story here. I've seen many ghost hunters. Oh, you gotta.
I used to do it all the time. EVP session.
Yep.
What? What time is it?
It's these kind of things. Like all these factors come together, and you really have to look. And little things too. Eye floaters. I mean, most people have something. Have little floaters in their eye, and you don't always notice it. Usually, it takes something. Like looking at a bright light source, like if you look up at the sky during the day, you'll be able to see your little floaters. But you can replicate that condition at night when someone shines a flashlight in your face.
Right.
So there's potential there. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but there's potential.
Yep. Okay, JD, question. Has anyone ever reported a shadow person in the middle of the day, full sunlight? Boy, to be honest, I don't know. I didn't read that many reports of them. But if it's anything like reports of apparitions, which I looked at some of the historical case collections to try to see, do people report shadow figures in the historical case collections? Nothing that would be reported as a shadow. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. There might be some myths, but they eventually seem to have formed into something more human and more recognizable. But as far as seeing them in the full sunlight, boy, I don't know, to be honest with you. I really don't know. I'd have to look into it further. Tim, Kenny, did you guys find anything like that?
I've never come across anything, I would say, like outside, during the day, full sunlight, beautiful, sound of music kind of day. No, I have never come across a case like that. I've had people say that they've seen a shadow figure like down the hall again during the day, but inside.
Yeah.
So inside where you can have shadows still.
Okay.
So that's as far as that goes for me.
Okay.
I would imagine. I'm going to say yeah. I'm going to say I bet there have been, only because if it is biological in nature, then it's going to be the shadow is going to be or shit coming from
You're not even reading a word.
originating. Damn, I've already had
that was the word.
That was, don't judge me.
Brain cells
a lot of alcohol.
Brain cells are working hard tonight.
Ooh, it's originating from inside your eye, so the shadow would be seen from inside your eye, or a floater, as you said, rather than outside. So if it's biological and it's coming from a default or a problem with your eye, then I wouldn't say there would be any reason why somebody would have that experience in full daylight.
Right.
So for you all that live close to this, Bob says there is one spot in the U.S. with a lot of reported shadowy people, and a lot of people try to avoid the town as much as possible. In fact, it's about 2.5 hours south of me. Some call it D.C. Wow.
Wow.
Bob.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, my God.
Oh, I can't hear it if it worked.
Is Tim trying to play with sound effects?
I think he's trying to play with sound effects.
I was trying to do that.
Good thing I have here. Have from John.
You're killing me, Smalls.
Did you hear that?
Yes. I was looking for the drum roll.
I gotta mark these.
I do too. That's why I'm like, is this it?
I don't know.
It. There it is.
Okay, John. Question: have any of these been caught on camera? Yes. Supposedly, there's pictures and video of shadow people, but we'll leave it up to our video and photographic expert at the bottom of the screen there, Kenny. At least the ones that I've seen, they look like they could have multiple potential natural explanations, but again, that is not my area of expertise.
Yeah, there's a couple explanations for them, and just throwing out a few just off the top of my head. You can have, and I don't know which one of you guys touched on it, I think, but you can have a shadow in a shadow. And you can create a shadow in a shadowy place, because if there's the lighting conditions, you can have something blocking a light. But then if you have something else within that shadow that's more solid blocking some light, you can create a different shadow within a shadow. It's really cool, but it's something to be aware of. And I mean, we've seen something. Oh, that in particular looks to me like somebody was holding a camera like this, and they had their finger in front of the lens.
Mm-hmm.
And that created that, because that looks like the tip of your finger, like that. I've seen that quite common, and it actually looks it doesn't look like they use the flash on the camera. It looks like the light is coming from a different source on this. But yeah, I mean, something like that is right. It's right up against the camera, because you can see on actually it's closer to me, on the left side, you can see that there's a part of a box on the ground, but then you can see the wall behind it going up, and the shadow is in front of that. So this is telling me that it's in front of everything in that scene. And to me, that would mean, okay, that's probably right up against the lens. You can also create things at West Virginia Penitentiary. The picture that they have a famous picture of alleged shadow there.
We recreated that, didn't we?
I think we started to, but I still have my Mavica that we have to go back. So,
yep.
But you can be down. We see this a lot on the reality TV shows where the camera guy has a light and they're shining it on everything, and then somebody walks in front of them, creates a shadow themselves, and then takes a picture with the camera they're holding, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know where this shadow came from." But then if you can trace it on the floor or trace their shape, you can figure out it's them. There's a lot of explanations for it, but it's just hard going through. You have to get so much information in detail and recreate it. But yeah, there's the ones that I've seen are either caused by the people or they are very subtle. And I think, Dave, like you said, you can have a bug, a moth flying around a light bulb, creating a shadow. And if you're not in that room and you just see this fleeting little faint shadow go through like the doorway or along the wall, that can totally fool you and make you think, "Oh shit, I saw a shadow figure," when you didn't.
So that picture came when I was looking. That's someone said that was a shadow person, just in like a blob form.
Blob.
An out of shape form. All right. So Melissa has a question, but she's requesting that Tim reads it.
Oh my God. Okay.
Tim?
Let me warm up.
No warm up.
How now, brown cow? How now? Okay. Run with me on this. When your eyes are closed and you see those spots, it's because of rapid eye movement. What's to say that when you open your eyes in a dark room, that shadow people aren't an amalgamation? Shit.
Amalgamation.
Amalgamation. Yes. Of rapid eye movement. I was on such a good roll there.
Well, I mean, I'll throw in real quick. I mean, the spots that you're seeing are floaters. Eye floaters. They're not caused by rapid eye movement.
And a lot of the floaters you see in your eyes, especially in the daytime when you're looking at the sky, those are actually white blood cells moving around in your eyes. That's what you're seeing.
Right.
I'll have to check, but when you rub your eyes, like when you close your eyes and rub your eyes and it causes spots, it seems like I've read somewhere that's you're firing neurons in the back of your eye. And it causes what you're seeing is just the result of neurons firing.
I mean, your eyes are moving around, but I'm not sure if we're talking about like just normal eye movement or rapid eye movement when you're talking about when you're dreaming.
REM sleep. Yeah.
REM sleep.
That's what I get. When I see rapid eye movement, especially with capital letters, I think of REM sleep, which is different than what we're talking about here. But yeah, I don't know how else to answer that question.
Okay, so let's move into the history a little bit. I'm going to go through some of the history. There isn't a whole lot to talk about here, actually, and maybe you guys have more to add to it. But originally on Coast to Coast AM on April 12th, 2001, Art Bell interviewed Native American elder Thunder Strikes, also known as Harley Swift Deer Reagan, and asked people to submit their stories of shadow people. And they got a ton of people submitting their stories and their pictures of potential shadow people. Then in October 2001, Heidi Hollis coined the term shadow people in her book, The Secret War, The Heavens Speak of the Battle. I did end up buying the Kindle version of that book. I got about 25% of the way through it. and it's interesting. Interesting. I'm going to leave it at that. And then now I got to pronounce a name.
Do it.
Naluta Chito, Chito, a shadow, talks about shadowy beings in the Choctaw tribe of the Native Americans. And that's really the majority of the current history on it. But yeah, I mean, if you talk about shades of the underworld and demons and shadowy figures, yeah, that's been talked about a long time, a very long time. But as far as shadow people, 2001 is when the term was coined, and then it really took off in that April 2001 Coast to Coast episode, where people started talking about shadow people. And I reached out to Dr. Callum Cooper in the overseas to ask him, in one of the recent studies you did talking about after death communications, ghosts, apparitions, what people see. They did a whole paper and a whole study on the phenomenology of what people report recently with these type of things. I'm like, did anybody describe anything in your data that they would call shadow people? And his comment was, yeah, they don't really use that term over here. And while maybe some people would have referred to them as shadow people or shadows, they don't really hear that term over there, and they didn't really find it or say anything specific about it in that study. And then obviously I went back and looked at some of the older, Phantasms of the Living and the other historical case collections, and you don't really see a whole lot specifically noting shadow people or shadow figures. Pretty interesting. So it seems like, to me at least, it's a relatively recent phenomena. So did you guys find anything else or anything additional to that?
I gotta say, I ran across, I think, exactly the same thing you did. On the history of it, I guess I could kind of talk about this a little bit. I saw someone early on in the chat had mentioned shadow people and illusions or possible hallucinations with they actually used methamphetamines in the comment. Some of the research that I read on the actual, when I looked up, they used Google Scholar to look it up, read some studies, talked about working with recovering people from methamphetamine addiction and how they're up for so long, 2, 3, sometimes maybe close to 4 days, lots of problems going on. And their accounts of people like things in the shadows wherever they are and watching them. And of course that doesn't mean it's shadow people, but it could just be paranoia. But they did talk about seeing shadowy type people that would lurk around them and having the sensation of people behind them and beside them as well. But of course, that's very chemically induced, not necessarily biologically, or the origins are, but it was similar in some of the accounts, specifically from sleep deprivation.
Right.
Yep. Kenny?
Yeah.
Yes, he agrees.
No,
okay.
I was looking up references for that, for what you were talking about, the methamphetamines and sleep deprivation. It looks like that's what it was. Meth users were sleep deprived, and they were reporting seeing shadowy figures. And I don't know, because I don't have the books yet, which I'll get tonight, but because it sounds interesting. But it sounds like they were seeing shadowy forms, and maybe not necessarily people, but things. Which, yeah, if I can see that, sleep deprived, on drugs, you're hallucinating, you're seeing all kinds of weird shit. Who knows what they're actually seeing? And I think that's one thing that we should also address too, is that when people report seeing shadow figures, it's very hard, and this is true across the board, it's very difficult to really understand exactly what people are seeing, because they're giving us a description, but they can only describe so much. They're the only ones that saw it. They can tell me they saw a figure of a man just dressed just in a shadow, but I don't know exactly what they saw. Maybe it did look like a man, maybe it didn't. That's the drawback to this. When you're trying to describe what you saw, it's like, all right, well, I can get only so much detail and speculate on my part. Then my imagination kicks in, and I have to recreate a visual from their explanation. So, yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there. Sounds smart.
I mean, you talk about the natural explanations, which we'll jump to that before we talk about what people think they are on a paranormal level. Natural explanations, everything from hypnagogia, waking hallucinations. The one thing about that was interesting, though, is that it seems like a lot of those are in color, and a lot of the reports of the shadow people are, black and white, of course. Sleep paralysis, that's another natural explanation. I think we've covered a lot of these already. Of course, that obviously doesn't account for some of the reports, which who knows how true they are or not, but people report object movement, and then, of course, scratches and bruises associated with seeing shadow people. Of course, the scratches and bruises, people can scratch and bruise themselves when they're sleeping, tossing and turning, whatever. If you have a pet that sleeps in the bed with you, I know for damn sure that our Jack Russell Terrier, he'll sleep in bed with us, and he'll have a little nervous twitch once in a while. That one claw on that one leg, oh man, he'll leave a hell of a scratch. And if I was a true believer, I'd think demons were totally tormenting me when I slept. Suggestion, you talked about sleep deprivation. The thing I came across is meth addicts. They report seeing shadow figures after long periods of sleep deprivation. But again, not everybody that reports these, they're not sleep, or they might not have sleep paralysis. They might not have sleep deprivation, and they might not be meth addicts. So there's other things going on. Visual hallucinations, they've seen this in people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. But I think a lot of what could be going on is the misinterpretation or misperception of what is in the environment during times of either high emotion or sensory deprivation or low light. So I think that's part of it. And, looking at humans and evolution, we definitely would do better if we overestimated a threat out of our peripheral vision and thought it was something that was going to attack us. Because you want to err on the side of caution when there's a threat involved. So evolutionary wise, you're going to want to be able to identify, even if you're wrong some of the time, identify a threat and deal with it, as opposed to, I saw some shadowy human figure out of the corner of my eye, I'm just going to let it go. Probably not a good idea, because that one time out of 10, there really is a threat there. You're not going to do well. Then again, the peripheral vision we've talked about, and then the figment of the imagination. I think, Tim, you talked about high emotion. It's a stress reaction, sensory deprivation. And then one of the things I came across, which was interesting, and this does not explain all of the different experiences people have, but they found in a patient, this was published in Nature, volume 443, 21 September 2006, when they inserted electrodes in the temporal parietal junction in the brain, that this particular patient experienced a shadow to the right of them, behind them. It was, but the interesting thing there is, and this does not explain the reports of shadow figures to me, because it mimicked what she was doing, or what this patient was doing. So if they were sitting, it was sitting to the side. If they were standing up, it was standing behind them. So it doesn't exactly explain everything, but it provides maybe a potential physiological mechanism in the brain. And then there's still debate about whether or not environmental electromagnetic fields could be stimulating certain parts of the brain and get you to think that there's something going on that's anomalous or not. So those are a couple natural explanations. I think we touched on most of them, right? Did I miss any that we've talked about?
The one you're talking about, was that the 22 or 23-year-old female?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I read that too. Did you read the part where she had reported that they were doing visual tests with cue cards, and the shadow person reached over and tried to stop her from looking at the cue card? I thought that was pretty creepy, actually. But that was while the left part was being stimulated as well.
Yep. And she also described the feeling as being unpleasant when she had these experiences. So similar to what people report with some of their personal experience of shadow people.
Yeah, that paper popped up like almost every other time. It was like a 2006.
But on the other hand, I don't think we should use that as a completely explain anything, because it's one
I agree.
One patient. And as much as we criticize and talk about the paranormal community having weak data, an N of 1 where they're sticking an electrode actually physically in the brain is not going to account for and explain every instance of a shadow person out there.
That's not your typical environment for an everyday person.
Also,
not normally.
I'm certainly not a doctor, but it also, she was in for other neurological issues, wasn't she? And they just were experimenting or testing on how to, or maybe it was
they were just poking around, literally poking around in her brain.
So you still could have the idea that it was part of whatever else she was there for the problem neurologically, and maybe it was a combination of what trauma she had or biological problem plus having that part of her brain stimulated as well. So I'm like you, like, it's interesting, but you're right, it's one person.
This I looked it up. I had it up too because this is one of the pages that I had up so I could pretend that I did research. But it says that the finding emerged by accident. Neurologist Olaf Blanke of the Brain Mind Institute in Switzerland were attempting to identify the source of epileptic seizures in a 23-year-old woman.
Right.
And they applied a mild current through surgically implanted electrodes to various regions of her brain. Not much happened until they hit the TPJ. I'm not going to try to say that name.
Temporal parietal junction.
And that's where she reported a motionless, speechless shadow that imitated her body posture and actions. This almost sounds like work that was I remember Susan Blackmore was talking about that she did work on. Did I freeze or did you guys freeze?
I'm good.
Did they freeze?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Where she was, because I attended one of her talks like 3 years ago, and she was talking about how they were setting these experiments up and having people. It was like a disassociation kind of experiment where they had something like a fake hand touching someone's back while they were looking to a viewer as they were reaching out, and it made them almost disassociate with their body. And it's not the same thing, but it kind of reminded me of that experiment where it was almost like, for lack of a better term, it was a shadow of this person's, it was her like shadow self next to her repeating or mimicking what she was doing. So it's interesting.
So Brenda Lewis asks, could high electromagnetic areas also cause one to see shadow people? I would expand that. I'm not sure it's just high, but it's the time and space variation, which means it's the peaks and valleys. And that goes back to some of the work by Michael Persinger and Jason Braithwaite, looked to see if the fields that they used in the Persinger lab were similar to what was found in supposedly haunted locations where people were having experiences. Obviously, Persinger did report some very vague type experiences using what he termed as the God helmet, using electromagnetic field stimulation of the brain. However, those are not 100% conclusive, because they think it could have been due to suggestion as well. And then out in the environment, they've only found those type of electromagnetic fields, the certain characteristics, in only about 5 or 10% of the haunted locations. So, is it possible? It is. Is it conclusive? No, it's not.
Okay.
All right. So it is 8 o'clock. One thing I'd still like to cover is the various paranormal explanations people put through and get our comments on those. So why don't we-
Demons.
what's that?
Demons.
Demons.
Travelers.
Of course, there's always demons. So I know, I think Bob or John or somebody wanted to take a bathroom break, which I agree with 100%. So we'll go ahead and we'll roll the commercial.
I
for
drink
2
a lot
minutes
of
and
coffee,
20 seconds. And then we will be right back and we'll finish up with the paranormal explanations people have put forward, discuss that, closing comments, and we'll move on from there.
Sweet.
We'll be back. And we're back. And we're learning more and more about our audience and our listeners as we go on. So just so you know, Tiffany says, too much information, but I didn't realize how bad I had to pee until I started going. Thank you for the update.
I don't think she's allowed to say TMI. No.
And then Bob with probably the most covert sexual comment yet. Something to ponder during the commercial break. Dry humor suggests the moist humor exists.
We
boy.
have fucked up people.
Bob always taking it to the next level.
Yep. I love it.
Oh God. All right, moving on. So hypotheses, because there's more than one,
Yes.
on what shadow people are according to the paranormal community. So I'm going to start off with Tim. What did you find and what are people proposing that these things are?
Chewy. I listed them aliens, ghosts, demons, jinns, time travelers, and interdimensional beings. They seem to progress. I think it was pretty good that we talked about how the evolution of them tends to show itself in some literature, in some writings. I did enjoy finding the hat shadow figure. that became popular, and it wasn't until later on that it became popular. And then that being believed to be the origin of Slender Man. If anything else, I just thought that was really interesting, how that kind of evolves through that. Other than that, it sounds like anything that can be thrown at this in a paranormal explanation or cause or reason is and has been thrown at it. I was surprised not to find something with Bigfoot attached to shadow people.
Well,
I mean, even the time travelers. So
yes, time
one of
travelers.
Yep. One of the interesting things was some type of like either alien or time travelers that were there to help kick off our society and introduce fire and technology, that they only had so much energy to travel. So what we see with shadow people is just the remnants of what they have left to pop in and check on us. There was something else that I found, and I wish I had actually jumped down the rabbit hole with it. But if anybody wants to check out a story called Sleep Study GR16 from Camden College in 1971. I don't know if it exists. I don't even think that there's anything showing that it exists, but it was supposed to be a sleep deprived study using subjects that were, I think, students at the college. And after so much set of time, that they began reporting seeing them, and the scientists kind of blew it off, and then later on they were found killed by the shadow people. So yeah, as far as like I said, like anywhere you travel, anywhere you look, anything you read, it just, the cause that gives rise to them looks like it's more cultural than anything.
Okay, Kenny, anything to add?
I mean, I found the same thing when I did my quick search 30 seconds before we started. So like demons, aliens, multi-dimensional beings, servants of hell. And that goes back to the show Ghost, or the movie Ghost. I mean, they carried people down to hell. And it's ironic that that movie came out in 1990. So like 11 years before the term shadow people were coined. So it shows a little bit, at least in pop culture, how these kind of figures were around, but maybe not totally accepted by ghost hunters yet. Evil spirits. I saw the time travelers too, but like evil spirits, because I mean it's totally a racist thing because they're black. I guess that everything is like, if it's dark, and if it's black or dark or just really, really just dark, it's evil. It's supposed to be evil. Whereas on the opposite side, if it's glowing white, it's an angel or something good.
Right.
That's very interesting perspective there. I mean, that might be something to kind of like look into. I mean, this is way off subject, but that's just an interesting take on that. Where's my notebook?
Oh boy. And that's about it. It's almost like, because we see it in like pop culture with Supernatural, and even like other shows that deal with that. It's always, if it's a bad spirit or evil spirit, they are never dressed nicely. They are in like horrible torn clothing, or it's all black. They're very gothic kind of looking. So I mean, it's always, as far as I could see, it's been associated with evil and bad things necessarily. Because I mean, the spirit shades or whatever that drag you down to hell,
Right.
I don't think they're necessarily evil. They're just, they're the messenger. That's it. They're like, they got a job to do.
That's hell's Uber service.
There you go. They're just like, they punch in. They're like, all right, we got to go get Fred, drag him down to hell, take him, boom, Drop them off. That's it. They're done.
But there's
Punch out.
disagreement within the paranormal community of if they're actually evil or not. Some say they're neutral, some say they're helpful, some say
Right.
they're evil. So there's a lot of discrepancy.
Yeah, even the time travelers were for their intent was to kick off our civilization. They gave us technology and advanced.
Right.
So the couple ones I would add is they also listed embodiments of actual people doing astral projection.
Oh.
That was an interesting one. Negative alien beings. They could be extraterrestrials that are cloaked, trying to.
Like
I'm trying not to laugh so I can get through this list. Supernatural entities, we talked about that. Shades of the underworld, we talked about that. A collection of negative energy, and I think that's what Brenda was referring to here with her question. But that is one of the thoughts that they are just a collection of negative energy that somehow manifests in the environment. And of course, because they're negative, as Kenny said, they're dark, they're evil, they got a bad vibe to them, they got a bad feeling to them. So yes, they present themselves as kind of a dark entity. And I think that's one of the things that people talk about when they talk about certain like tuberculosis sanatoriums like Waverly Hills, and because of all the bad things and the bad energy there. So we got to drink again. Get caught up on that.
Damn, stop using that word.
I'm out. I have to go downstairs.
Here it is. Another one, magical energy.
Oh,
Wait,
keep track of how many drinks.
Trying to make sure you guys are shit faced before we get off the air tonight. And
I'm
then the all-encompassing one, of course, ghosts. They got to be some sort of ghost. Right. And that triggered me to start looking into, okay, so if they're ghosts, why didn't they show up in some of the historical case collections? Why all of a sudden from the 1800s when they did the original case collections, Phantasms of the Living, you look at some of the more recent ones even, and they're not really noted. They don't note shadow people. What they do note is a recent one, investigations of the phenomenology and impact of spontaneous and direct after-death communications. If they talk about apparitions, 59.8% were like a whole body apparition, like a person. 25.3% only of the upper part of a human. 0.8% lower, 1.8% were unsure, and 12.4% said other. Now, yeah, maybe it's in the other, but they didn't specifically, as far as I know, point out that they were shadow people. And then when they asked them, what did it look like? 61.6% of the people said the apparition was solid. 12.5% said semi-translucent. 11.3% kind of foggy, a silhouette, but they're not saying dark shadows. Right. 14.6% were unsure, which, you know, you got that catch-all category of unsure each time. So maybe, but it's nothing that really stood out. And then in one of the other books I looked at, Poltergeist 1979, 20 to 48% of the apparitions seen were human phantasms. 0 to 4% were listed as misty. But again, there was no reports of shadows. Dark shadows. And then the census of hallucinations, 1889 to 1890. The one stat I found that was interesting, 132 out of the 1942 reports listed it as an incomplete apparition. But again, nothing that says shadows. So, you know, I always harp on and I always really talk about looking at those studies because they were big ones. They looked at what people were really experiencing as far as ghosts and apparitions. But where in the hell did the shadow figure and the dark figures come from? I'm not seeing it. Jersey. So if there's something really going on there, you think you would hear it.
Jersey.
Jersey?
Jersey. They came from Jersey.
They're Jersey. Jersey Shore.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, you look at it and think ghosts. Okay, so some people say ghosts, some people say demons, some people say aliens. So what the hell is it? If you all can't agree on what the potential cause of this is or what they are, how is it possible to really take those paranormal hypotheses seriously?
I
So
agree.
I think that that type of information that you just talked about makes me kind of go back to thinking more biological,
Mm-hmm.
only because when it's a biological experience, then it's very personable to the person, each individual. So maybe and maybe people of a certain culture can have similar reports. Maybe that's why you have so many with ghosts, so many with interdimensional beings. But because there seems to be lack of consistency, it just makes me think it's an individual biological experience, and that person has their report and their history, and their experience and their worldview, and they give that,
Mm-hmm.
instead of necessarily going along with what the reports are in a paranormal culture.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's probably, I'm leaning towards more biological. It's conditions, it's different conditions, it's misinterpretations, it's I'll keep going back to the evolution of ghost sightings, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something to consider. I mean, we went from orbs to ecto to, I mean, ecto had its own evolution within itself about what it started as and what it is, and then you had all these different visuals that keep going to the next step. So I think all of those really probably can cover a lot of these claims.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm always going to throw in the idea that fabrication is also a possibility. You know,
Sure.
when people want to have a story, when some certain people want to stand out because they want to be on TV, they will fabricate a story, you know, and sell it because they want to say, "Oh, I saw this, I saw that," and that's I'm not saying that's most of them, uh,
Right.
but it's definitely something that has to be considered.
Yep.
Um, Thrown in the pool there, but I don't see. And Dave brings up a great point with historically, they're just not there. They're a modern creation. They're a modern interpretation of this. So what's that tell you? You know,
Yep.
there you go. Drink.
All right. So
Drink.
I think we covered everything. So why don't we move on to our closing comments? And I will start with Tim.
Oh, I'm sorry. Freaking Kenny got me off. I think it's the shadow people. The whole thing is just really interesting to me. It's probably more something, I don't think in a paranormal sense that I would research in a paranormal type environment, but I do love that there seems to be like this really good probability or possibility that it's really grounded biologically, and that makes me very interested. Not to mention, not just like problems with the eyes, but also like when I get back to shit,
Fight or flight.
flight, or freeze. Yeah. You know, again, like just a tiny touch on it. The study I read talked about they did a lot of sleep deprivation with people, and they were like keeping people awake for like 96 hours, which I was like, is that ethical? But right off the bat, they said 24 hours, right at the start of 24 hours of sleep deprivation, is where misperceptions begin to happen visually. So that's one of the first things that happen. And I kind of thought about 24 hours, and I thought, man, that's a long time. And but then I kind of thought about, well, if you have someone that's doing a ghost hunt and they get up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or whenever, and they have to drive someplace. I don't know if they take naps, but when you're looking at 8 o'clock in the morning to 2, 3, or 4 o'clock the next day, I mean, that's almost 24 hours. And, depending on how how that might affect it as well. But
Right.
yeah, so one of the things that it came out 24 hours starts the visual misperceptions, not necessarily illusions or hallucinations. Oh no,
Good one.
but just all three.
See,
Oh my God,
she is not allowed to say TMI ever.
it's
You are banned.
Oh my God. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
I don't even know where the hell I was now. I'm just trying to imagine trying to do all three at once. I don't.
Oh
So,
boy.
Oh, boy.
anyway, the whole idea of shadow people just has me more interested because of the biological and psychological aspect of it, and I'll leave it there. I don't foresee anything paranormal about it other than it's a good story.
Okay. All right. Kenny?
Yeah, I agree with Tim for most of that. I mean, it really falls under several categories. Biological. There's conditions that do produce such effects. Visuals and visual optical illusions. There's that term for you, Tim. And I think there's we've seen it before. There's a severe lack of decent research by people claiming to investigate these things. You know, when we have your typical ghost hunters, they don't go the distance. They don't do their due diligence and figure out what could cause this, what natural causes could create a shadow figure visual. But we've covered a bunch of things tonight that do create such illusions, and we can see them. So that's something to consider. Cultural aspects where you go back into religions and belief systems, and you're going to have people that do believe in entities, usually like godlike or demonic, or however they perceive their good and bad versions of their religious entities. They're going to be ones that are shadowy and shades and just dark shadow kind of things. So you're going to have that belief, and I'm sure plenty of reports go unreported where they have some kind of a experience, but they're not going to report it because it's a more of a religious experience. So they're not going to put it out there. You have the evolution of what is sexy in ghost hunting. You know, what is the draw? What gets people excited and clicking on your website or your social media accounts? And then there's also the bit of fabrication that comes into it because of some of the same reasons for fame and fortune. I don't know where the fortune is, but except for like people like Baggins. Bullshitter. That you fabricate some experiences and you put it out there so you can get attention and get acknowledgement for things. Do I think there's anything paranormal going on? I don't think so. I can't close the book on it. I don't think so, because I don't think the evidence that we've looked at or that we've looked at over time, because I know I joked that I didn't look anything up before the show, and I didn't, because I was doing I was behind on deadlines, but I have looked into this frequently over the years.
Right.
So it's not like I don't have a base knowledge on it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can lead up to this kind of belief. And I think it's interpretation by the person, because I mean, we've seen it where someone has some kind of experience and they make up their own mind and they tell you the story with their mind made up. Rarely it does happen where they go out and ask somebody, and it depends on who they ask, who influences them. Because if they ask a ghost hunting team or someone that highly believes in it, or their aunt that's a spiritualist, yes, they're going to get an answer saying, oh, that's a shadow person. And then that's going to influence their belief, and they're going to tell that story as it really happened this way. That's it. But no, I don't think there's anything to it, as in like supernaturally. Is that a word? Supernaturally?
Just
It
like
is now.
paranormal. Sure.
I'm going to own that.
Coin
that. 2021, Kenny Biddle.
Put it on a t-shirt.
So
yours.
I don't think there's anything supernatural about it. I think there's a lot of other explanations that we could explore before going to something like that. So there you go. I'm done.
Okay. So I'll close with people have experiences. Obviously, they think they're seeing or having an experience and it impacts them. Not all the natural explanations explain all not one natural let me put it this way, not one natural explanation explains all of the experiences.
Mhm.
So there might be multiple explanations. I think there's a lot of physical and psychological explanations going on here. It's a complex phenomena, and it's a complex environment that people are experiencing these things in. So it's multimodal and it's pretty recent. So looking at that and taking all that into account, I really seriously question the paranormal explanations. I really do. I'm not sure. Can we, like Kenny said, can we completely rule it out? No, you can't. But there's a lot of stuff going on here. There could be physiological, psychological, environmental things that could definitely be playing a role in this. And yeah, it's interesting. People have it, but it's recent. And one of the things I'm always looking at is what do the historical case studies look like? What do the newer studies look like? Are they finding different things? Are they finding similar things? So if you're really interested in trying to discover if there's aliens, ghosts, demons, this one seems to cover all areas and nobody has any agreement on what these things are. So I don't think it's going to shed a lot of light on any particular phenomena at all. So anyway, that's it. That's my comments. So I am going to move on and see if anybody has anything going on, and I'll start. No, I will be traveling. Actually, I'll be traveling for work, so I might be able to have an opportunity to go visit Robert the Doll.
Yeah.
I am down. I fly into Key West next week for a meeting further up in the Keys, so I'm hoping to find some time to stop in Key West and see Robert the Doll and not ask permission and take a photo. I'll let you know how it turns out, Tim.
You got
You're
to
living on the edge, man.
You got to take video the whole time.
I will.
Yeah,
I will.
That'd be awesome. And we can play
Hopefully
it.
I have time to do that. So, all right, turning it over to Tim, because we know Kenny always has a few things to talk about. We'll go with a quick one.
Do I have anything coming up? Also, no. So, but I opened with this. I want to close with it just so it's kind of bookended. If you are seeing things and having shadow figures and having problems with your eyes, don't call a Ghostbuster. Call your doctor.
Right.
In all seriousness, it could be an indication of an eye disease or an eye problem. And if you do have a concern, do not rule out contacting your doctor or contacting a physician to have your eyes checked. So with that, I don't have anything going on.
All right, Kenny.
Okay. All right. So every Friday night, I do this little show called the Skeptical Help Bar, which starts at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we drink a lot because it's a bar, and we talk about paranormal topics and skeptical viewpoints, which is usually mine. And I have guests on sometimes. I don't have a guest yet for next week, but I'll be on. I'm doing that. Tomorrow, I'm driving up to New York City. I'll be in Brooklyn tomorrow. And for twofold, two reasons. One is there's a long-standing investigation I've been doing trying to find the final resting place of Rose Mackenberg, who was the chief investigator of Harry Houdini when he was, going after psychics. But she's buried somewhere, and I have some clues, but there's a big mystery about it. And so I'm going up. One of the cemeteries that I think she's buried at, it's listed on her death certificate, but there's two listed on her death certificate. Go figure. Bitch. I'm going up there to search, and I'm being joined by my wife and our friends Mitch Silverstein.
Oh, cool.
He's coming up with Stephanie Bond.
Very nice.
both of them are coming up, and we're gonna search through the cemetery for a little bit, and then go across the street, because it's right across the street from the 1964 World's Fairgrounds. So we're going to go over there and look at some of the buildings, existing monuments that are still there, and we're going to do a little tour, little K&D Adventures video for that, because Mitch and Steph are volunteers for the New York Pavilion, the State Pavilion that they're refurbishing now and renovating. So we might be able to get in there and get a sneak peek at that. So we're doing that, and then God, I always have shit going on. I still have like 3 classes left with Lloyd Auerbach on his skeptical approach to parapsychology. So I'm doing that Tuesday nights, but it's too late to sign up. So I don't know why I mentioned that. I really don't know. And then that's kind of it. I have a couple secret projects that I don't want to talk about yet until they're done and over with. But that's about it. So I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We will be back next week with another show, and everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Awesome.
Tortured souls.